I'm not sure how to follow that. Thank you, Misa. Well, I believe I was emptying the dishwasher when I heard my mother say a sentence that stopped me. On my way from the dishwasher to the cabinet shelf with 2 ceramic mugs hung onto my left-hand thumb and 4 blue plates balancing carefully on my right hand, I stopped. I find that it's always when you're emptying the dishwasher that you happen upon a life-changing transition, always holding things that could be broken. My mother was telling a story at the table to my daughters, a story about my father that I had never heard before. My dad, when he entered the 1st grade, was a year younger than his classmates, and consequently, it seemed he wasn't very interested in school. And this continued year after year until one winter, he got sick and he had to be out of school for several weeks. My grandparents hired a teacher to come to their home, and that teacher changed my father's life, teaching him to enjoy learning. My mom ended the story by saying, "You know, girls, your grandfather loved learning the rest of his life, but he never shook the feeling that he wasn't smart enough." And this was the moment. Ceramic mugs, plates in hand. Wait, what? I'm sorry. What did you say? Dad didn't feel smart? Oh yeah, she replied. He always thought that he had to work hard to get ahead. It was a hidden fear that he carried with him throughout his life, that he was just never smart enough. And inside, a small voice whispered to me, that's funny, because that's the hidden feeling you've always carried. Not smart enough. Keep it hidden." How had my dad, I wondered, kept it hidden from me, and yet still passed it along to me? Now, I have learned from listening in life and in ministry to people's most honest stories, I have learned that all of us have fears, donkeys, if you listen to Robin's stories, that are hidden in plain sight. And yet they are fears that get smuggled from one generation to the other. Are we smart enough? Are we enough? Smart enough? Beautiful enough? Funny enough? Tough enough? Loving enough? The list can go on. I'm sure in your head you are thinking of the enoughs, right? The question is, are we worthy of love? And are we worthy of love for being ourselves, virtues and vices? A few days later, I was speaking with a coach that I have been working with, and I shared this story and asked, so how do I keep from passing this fear onto my own children? She didn't directly answer the question, as they generally don't. She encouraged me instead to reach out to my father's siblings, to his 2 brothers and his sister, and to tell them the story that I had heard and how it hit me, and ask them if they carried it too. So I started with my dad's eldest brother. My uncle's first response after hearing the story and me sharing a little bit about myself, he said, "You know, Emily, this is a bit above my pay grade." And I said, "Wow, Ricky, that sounds like you're saying you're not smart enough to answer this question." And we laughed. Yeah, that's probably what that does sound like. So it wasn't just me, and it wasn't just my dad. We were not alone. But it was in the conversation afterward with him and my aunt and my uncle that I received this sort of unexpected gift from them. They then shared stories about how they confronted their fear throughout their lives, how they hadn't let it take over. You see, often we work hard to keep our fears hidden for fear that we will be seen as an imposter, but they do show up, maybe not to us, but they play into our relationships. They show up in the decisions that we make. They hold us back because they are whispers of, oh, you can't do that. Oh, they won't let you do that. Oh, you shouldn't try that. And they stop us from growing. It's like being in a fist fight without realizing that one fist is tied behind your back, and you keep trying to throw punches, and you keep wondering, why do I keep losing this fight? It's because you need to free both fists. You need to find your own sense of freedom from these fears. Eddie Izzard confronted his fear one afternoon in 1985. He was 23 years old. He had been planning and avoiding this moment for about as long as he could remember. It was the moment when he walked down the Islington High Street in England in a dress and heels and full makeup. It wasn't until after he was caught changing back into jeans by some teenage girls. It wasn't until they chased him down the street screaming at him, hey, why are you dressed as a woman? It wasn't until he decided to stop running, to turn and face them and explain himself. That was the moment that he learned the power in confronting fear rather than avoiding it. And he learned that from then on, he would never let other people define him. In fact, Eddie Izzard not only felt he could face down the fears that scared him, he went chasing after them. Street performing, stand-up comedy, marathon running. He ran 27 marathons in 27 days. Eddie Izzard is relentless. He says, you think if I can do something that hard but positive, maybe I can do anything. It's from people like Eddie Izzard, it's a little blurry, and my dad's siblings that I have learned that I can't stop this fear from being passed on to the next generation. I can't stop it. It will be passed on whether I talk about it or not. But I can share with them, be it my children or others, how I faced my own fears. And maybe my stories, maybe our stories will help them face down their own. This is true for us as individuals, but it is also true about who we are as a community. When I started working here at Beacon way back in 2005, I was out in the city of Summit when I met a longtime resident. I shared with her that I was the minister, one of the ministers of the Unitarian congregation. Oh, she said, her face lit up. That little white church at the corner of Waldron and Springfield. I've always wondered what happens inside your building. You all keep yourselves so well hidden. I thought, what an odd thing to say. For me, our congregation, the story that I told myself was that our congregation had a long history of involvement in our city and in movements in our county, but it seems we kind of did it in a covert nature. I should probably tell you, because I had to remember, that it wasn't until 2007 that we actually put a sign up in front of our building saying who we were. Thank you to Chris and Helen for doing that. What are we hiding from, I wonder? What fear is lurking in us as a community? That is our story. And then I read this story of our founding. Some of you know it. In 1906, a Unitarian minister from Buffalo, New York, ran into his childhood friend, Parker King, a successful businessman here in Summit. They ran into each other on a train. At the time, Summit was dominated by Christian congregation. The three Jewish synagogues were not here yet. St. Teresa's Catholic Church was. And Parker King wanted a liberal church that would support people's search, a free search for their own religious truths. The two of them spent most of that train journey considering what it would take to organize a Unitarian church in Summit. Throughout 1907, Parker King invited small groups of people from Summit to come together for a series of Unitarian meetings. And after 1 year, this small group had a big decision to make, whether or not they would establish a formal congregation. The conversation went round and round and round. Parker King kept a fairly extensive account of the conversation and showed all of the problems that people presented if we were to establish ourselves as a congregation. Well, we couldn't do that. Well, if we do this, then this is going to happen. And if we do that, then that is going to happen. Problem after problem after problem, until one man, Russell Hinman, bless him, grew so fed up with the conversation that he proposed a solution that they not organize a Unitarian church in Summit. And that resolution was rejected. It's a funny story, right? So very Unitarian Universalist that we would not establish ourselves, but we would not establish ourselves. And I just left it there for a long time as that funny, quirky story that is who we are. But now I wonder what seeds were planted in our founding. We shouldn't not be here. But I wonder, do we believe we should be here? I wonder if our fear is that we are not enough. And what are the whispers that we hear should we claim who we are? How do you even pronounce that? Do you have any good news to share with anybody? What, are you a new religion? Wait, that's not even really a religion. These are all things that I have heard. And so we keep ourselves hidden. And I think sometimes it's hidden under the cover that, we aren't evangelical, right? That's a good cover. But I'd like to call BS on it, because it takes a hider to know a hider. What if people found out who we really were? What if we just owned it? Kathleen Norris reminds us that fear is the beginning of wisdom and that it has the power to set us free. I recently reread our congregation's second century report, headed by Claudia Cohen, created at the turn of the century as we were preparing for our 100th anniversary. It was a task force that held a future search retreat to determine who we Unitarian Universalists here in Summit would be as we took our first steps into this new century. And here is one of the phrases that I found and loved. To be ourselves, but even more so. To be ourselves, but even more so. In that, I hear a longing to be visible as we are, as individuals, for all of our multiple identities, but also as a community. It's risky, though. Am I right? It's risky to be who you are. Each time that we have tried to become more visible, I have watched us confront our hidden fears. Like echoes of that founding conversation, I have heard us say, if we do this, there will be problems. What if we discover we aren't enough? It's that hidden fear that has been smuggled from generation to generation. In my time here, in 14 years, believe it or not, we have confronted a lot of fears. For those of you who are new to this congregation, you could be like, what? You guys are out on the street like every day. What are you talking about? But so we have become more and more visible, but there are two fears that have lay hidden, where I have heard people actually say, we can't do that. We'll never be able to do that. And the first was to change our name, and the second was to build a new sanctuary. These two subjects came up at the very first board meeting that I ever attended in September of 2005, and I just have to say that bold person who raised those issues, that first meeting, It was like everyone turned their backs and the air got sucked out of the room. Maybe if we just don't look at them, we won't have to address the issue. Because if you think about it, a name and a place proclaim who you are to the world. And they force us in fundamental ways to confront our hidden fears. I am happy to say that it was 2 years ago this month, March of 2017, that we claimed our name. And not only did we add our universalist heritage, and not only did we become more inclusive of our multiple religious identities by changing from church to a congregation, but we claimed ourselves as a beacon, a light in the world, saying, here we are. That's something. Imagine that. And then there's that one last fear. No matter how much I love this sanctuary, it holds us back. I mean, if I'm just glib for a moment, sticking with the theme of visibility and invisibility, I want to say that it's real that a third of us, I can't see you because you're behind a column, and you can't see me, and I am standing up here. I want to say it's real that we have blinding sunlight that comes in from behind me that blinds all of you on a regular basis. You think we have a screen up because we want you to sing the hymns? We have a screen up so that you can see. And those are like the tiny little things. But every minister we have ever had has talked about the problems of our space. Every minister. In 1913, this place was built, this sanctuary, and it has kept us hidden, and it has kept us insular. How many services must we have on a Sunday to seat our entire, really 700-member congregation, if you include all of the children and all of the youth and all of the adults who call this place home? How many memorial services or weddings do we have to turn down because we can't seat the entire congregation? And if we do, we have to send them either out into the lobby or downstairs. How many public gatherings, how many times do we have to say no to Reverend Barber because he would draw too big of a crowd? Or interfaith gatherings? How many times must we say no? It feels to me like we are fighting with one hand behind our back and wondering why we are losing. In the year when this sanctuary was under construction, in 2001, we met in a school gym. I wasn't there at the time, but people never hesitate to tell me about it. They talk about how open it was and how spacious it felt and how inviting it was, because they could look around the room and they could see every face. And there was always room for one more chair or 10 more chairs, should the house be packed. We grew to love a gym as a sanctuary. Maybe not all of us, Helen. But some of us, yes. My friends, we are on the threshold of confronting what I think is a century-old fear. We have purchased the land which we never thought we could do. We never dreamed possible. We have over half of the funds. We have a beautiful design. The only thing that will stop us is our fear of becoming visible. Of all the messages we tell ourselves that we are not enough and that we don't have enough. Eddie Izzard says, it seems to me people are always capable of being either brave and curious or fearful and suspicious. And if you track humanity all the way through, the periods of success for civilization are those periods where we have been brave and curious. We live in a time of fear and suspicion. We do. People are carrying guns into sacred spaces and open firing. They are all too visible. This world calls on us. It pleads with us to come out of our invisible corners and to show up as brave, bold, and curious. Fear is the cheapest room in the house, said the 14th century Persian poet Hafiz. I'd like to see you in better living conditions. My friends, I want you to never forget that we are not meant to live in the cheapest room in the house. So our sanctuary, our new sanctuary, is not about growth for growth's sake. And it is not about building up the minister's ego. Believe me, it never has been. Do not let fear misguide you. When we put a shovel in that ground in 2020, it's 2019 right now, we will be confronting a century-old fear that we Unitarian Universalists are not enough. We will be claiming who we are, and we will become visible in new ways in the world, a world that needs us to be brave. For we are a beacon of love. And we won't stop there. Like Eddie Izzard, we'll start chasing after the things that scare us. I think our mantra will become, oh yeah, we can do that. Oh yeah, we can. And when the next generation comes, we will tell them our stories so that when fear comes calling for them, they will not shrink, they will not cower. They will stand their ground and they will be set free. That is my prayer for all of us. Amen.